All rise, we would be. Please be seated. We will SO.
Good morning again. Welcome back. The floor is of the Common Legal Representative of Victims. Please proceed.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President,
Madame, Messieurs les juges,
Your Honors,
les observations de la défense que nous avons
we
entendues hier et ce matin
listened to the defense
ont suscité
opening
chez nous
statements yesterday,
un certain
and
nombre
today.
d'interrogations.
And these have raised a number of
Nous
questions
souhaiterions
in our minds,
soumettre
which we would like to bring
déclaration
to your attention
de clôture.
through this, our final submission.
Monsieur le Président, Madame, Messieurs les juges,
Mr. President, Your Honors,
des milliers de demandes de participation nous sont passées
thousands
entre les mains.
of applications to participate in this
Nous
trial
avons participé
have been
à de
processed
nombreuses audiences
by
ici.
us.
Nous
Several
avons entendu des
hearings have been organized
dépositions
here.
de témoins.
We have received statements and heard testimonies
Mais le fait notable
by witnesses.
est
But
que
one thing
dans
stands
tous
out,
les récits,
namely
il y a au moins une
that
chose
in
constante.
all the narratives there is at least one
Les
constant
exactions
element,
des musulmans du Tchad
namely
ont
the
subi
exactions to
ont
which
été le fait
Muslims
des anti-Balaka. Ça, c'est
from
une
Chad
certitude.
were subjected
Tous les
were
témoignages sont concordants
the
sur ce point.
result of the actions of the anti-Balaka. And this is a
Je crois
certainty
que
around which all witnesses are
lorsque nous avons
in
entendu
agreement.
les observations d'hier,
That
Monsieur le
is
Président,
why,
où on
Mr.
a
President,
essayé de
when we
contourner
heard
cette
defense
réalité
yesterday trying to circumvent this
catégorisant
reality
les troupes
by
anti-Balaka en vrais
breaking
anti-Balaka et
down
faux
the
anti-Balaka,
anti-Balaka
Monsieur le
troops
Président,
into true anti-Balaka and
nous avons
fake
quand même
anti-Balaka,
été perturbés.
we were somewhat perturbed, Mr. President.
Dire que les anti-Balaka, les vrais anti-Balaka,
To
sont
say
des saints
that the true anti-Balaka
qui ne volent
were
pas,
saints who did not touch women, who did not steal,
dans le
and
but
who
de
did not
protéger
kill,
l'intégrité de l'amulette,
with a view to protecting the integrity of their amulets. Mr. President, mindful of what we have just said, this is tantamount to some kind of lone ranging, if one may say so. Mr. President, we can even say that this is tantamount to some lack of motivation or motives, so to speak, in the face of reality. Mr. President, we are here to do justice, and we all want to focus on the main thing rather than the subsidiary. You see, Mr. President, it is the anti-Balaka troops themselves who have asserted that they did not leave the Chadian Muslims any other alternative than for them to leave the country. We have heard several testimonies here wherein COM zones have stated that they no longer wanted to have any Muslims on their territory. and going on to say that if they decide to stay, we will massacre them. They have So he said that it was the leaders who asked him. Now, today, I hear it being said that Angela did whatever he wanted, whichever way he wanted, and this is quite unsettling for me, Mr. President. Angelo's testimony is available. He explained to the court that he had a chief who also had their own chiefs. Mr. President, Your Honors, I would also like to say a word on the remarks that I heard about the sale of land. Let us be clear on this point. We come from this country and we know how things happen there. Sale of land is not done there as it is done in The Hague or in Montreal. You see, things are different, and all land is not registered. You see, Mr. President, it is possible even in the city to buy land at a street corner under a tree or something of that nature. You see, you don't need to go into all those technicalities, especially in a location like Zongo. You can buy a piece of land without any documents, just by what we can refer to as a gentleman's agreement. That's how it happens, by word of mouth. Now we are given the impression that sale of land should be done in the same way as in organized countries. That would be a mistake, Mr. President. The same applies to the idea about a Western Union office. You see, what happens is that money transfers are done by the roadside on a table. So when you argue that there was no Western Union office, well, I think that is somewhat of an observation. We are dealing here with African reality, and we need to understand things in that context. You see, in several countries and in several African villages, money can be transferred from one person to another without any traceable evidence whatsoever. And this can be cross-checked. Mr. President, Your Honors, I also wanted to say to this court that I fully share the remarks of the prosecutor. I agree with him entirely regarding what he said earlier on. You see, when the argument is made as if we were at trial, one must say that it is too early. This is a confirmation of charges hearing, Mr. President, and you know better than we do what this is all about. So, Mr. President, I just simply wanted to draw your attention to the fact that reality differs from country to country. Things happen in Africa differently, and those of us who are on the ground in Africa can testify that things do not always unfold normally, and one needs to have lived in those countries, in those circumstances, to be aware of the various anomalies, so to speak, that may happen. Some people who have been referred to as liars, maybe they were not lying. They were probably telling the truth, but that truth may have been assessed from a different background. So, in any event, Mr. President, we hope that in this trial, in this case, the hope of the victims whom we meet on a daily basis will not be dashed. You see, the crimes charged in the DCC, Mr. President, can reasonably considered as having been committed because of the observations that we make on the field. In that regard, therefore, Mr. President, we believe that, and I said this yesterday, there is sufficient reason to believe that these charges will be confirmed. We are not saying that the accused person is guilty or not. We are simply saying, Mr. President, that there is sufficient evidence pointing to the commission of these crimes, and that the victims of these crimes are there. This is an incontrovertible reality that cannot be discarded. I would like to conclude, Mr. President, by offering these words. If there is a trial, if the charges are to be confirmed, and I'm saying this based on the principle of the presumption of innocence, if this were to happen, I think there will be a lot to submit by way of pleadings and arguments to substantiate the fact that these crimes were effectively committed and that the person who is being prosecuted is criminally responsible for the crimes charged by the prosecutor. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Maitre Fall. Now the floor is yours, madam.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Your Honors.
Messieurs les juges. Nous avons tous entendu
Yesterday,
la défense de Yekatom
we all heard
déclarer
Yekatom's defense say the following,
l'inscription en
and
temps réel
I'm referring to real-time transcript, page
à partir de la ligne 25.
78
Alors,
from line
quand
25.
ont les anti-Balaka,
So,
quelle a été leur récompense alors qu'ils ont
what
délivré Bangui?
did the anti-Balaka
Ce qu'ils ont
get?
eu,
What was their
une mauvaise
compensation
réputation.
for delivering Bangui?
Les victimes
What they got is a bad name.
ce procès,
The victims
cette audience,
who are following this
sont vexés
trial,
par ces propos.
this
Elles disent
hearing,
n'avoir jamais mandaté Mokom
are
et ces éléments
angry
anti-Balaka pour les défendre.
at these statements. They are offended by these statements. They say that they have never
Estime
given Mokom mandate,
que M. Mokom, les
nor have they given mandate
en réalité
to the anti-Balaka
traître.
elements. So they say that Mr. Mokom
n'a jamais
is
évoqué
accusing them of being traitors and of being
seul acte
ungrateful.
concret que lui et ses troupes
Mokom
faisaient en faveur des victimes.
has never
Par contre,
has not mentioned at any time any single action that he
les
and his
atrocités
troops
subies de la
perpetrated
part
on the victims.
de la bande à Mokom.
So victims,
Hier également,
in fact,
je fais référence à la transcription
were
d'ordre,
offended by these
page
statements
79,
on behalf of Mokom. I refer to yesterday's transcript at page 79, line 25, where the Mokom defense said, after having been designated as coordinator of operations, Mokom went to various bases and told the com zones
créer de désordre,
not to create disorder, to remain
attendre
together
ce qui allait
and to wait
se passer.
for what would transpire next.
Mokom ne nie donc pas
So,
son rôle
Mokom
de coordonnateur
does not
des
deny
opérations.
that he was the operations coordinator for the anti-Balaka.
Il ne nie pas non plus
He does not
les exactions
deny
commises par les anti-Balaka.
the crimes that were committed by the anti-Balaka.
Apparemment, s'il y avait
And apparently,
des ordres qu'il a donnés dans ce sens,
he
les ordres n'ont jamais été suivis.
gave orders.
Encore
If
moins,
there had been orders given in that
les
regard,
exactions commises
those orders
étaient
were
sanctionnées par les
not obeyed, and any outcome of
transcriptions d'hier.
exactions were not punishable either. So when we look at the transcript
A
again,
déclaré,
at page 83, line 4,
il va
Mokom's
négocier
defense declared that Mokom went to Brazzaville to negotiate a ceasefire
appelle Monsieur le
with
Président,
the representatives of Seleka. So let me recall, Mr.
le
President,
règlement de
your
procédure
honors,
et de preuve
that the rules
définit la victime
of
comme étant
procedure and
une personne
evidence
physique
describe victims as any physical individual who has suffered harm
relevant de la
because
compétence de la
of
Cour.
the commission of a crime falling within the jurisdiction of the court.
En l'intérêt de quelqu'un,
So, is it possible to act on behalf of someone
des viols,
and
des meurtres,
subject them
privations de
to
liberté,
harm such as rape,
persécution,
murder,
autres crimes,
persecution,
paradoxal.
and other crimes?
Il est clair que les anti-Balaka se sont constitués
Can
en
you
leur bourreau
so act
et
on the
comment
behalf of these people?
accepter cela?
So clearly, the anti-Balaka were their henchmen in the end. You see, Mr. President, the victims do not deny the atrocities committed by the Seleka, but rather than take it out on their enemy, the Seleka, they rather attacked a defenseless civilian population by using, by the way, the same approach as the Seleka, namely persecution, forcible transfers, forcible displacement, and this is what all the victims have been subjected to.
La République centrafricaine a un vaste territoire.
The Central African Republic is a vast country of more than 600,000 square kilometers, with a population of only about 6 million inhabitants. This means that
The time, the 30 minutes, what have elapsed now, according to my calculations. I'll give you 5 more minutes out of respect for the victims. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Honor.
Alors, je veux dire que
Mr. President, I would like
je veux
to
dire par là que
say,
tout
and
le monde se
what
connaît.
I've meant when I said that is that everyone knows one another. Everyone knows
Les
who
victimes
is who and who does
désigné
what.
Monsieur
The
Mokom
victims
ne sont
have
pas trompés.
designated Mr.
ceux qui ont
Mokom,
désigné
and they are
d'autres
not wrong. They have
responsables de leur
designated him and others as being the people responsible for the harm they suffered, people such as Mr. Yekatam. So saying that it was another person, it wasn't me, as we heard yesterday,
tel autre chef.
saying why some other leader has been released,
Et c'est par rapport à ça qu'on
and
demande sa liberté
then to turn around and say,
ne saurait prospérer.
that is why I should be released. Such an argument cannot be entertained. Other than the victims, if we look beyond the victims, who can speak on behalf of the
Les
victims?
victimes sont mieux placées
The victims are in a better position to speak to what they
quelle que
experienced,
soit la longueur de la nuit.
no matter how long the night may be. One day,
Président,
the dawn shall come.
les victimes
Mr. President, Your Honors, the victims are counting on the court
pour éviter le cycle de violence
so that
en République
one may
centrafricaine,
avoid
éviter
the unending cycle of violence in the Central African Republic,
l'impunité
and
se transforme
they
en
hope
bourreau.
that the victims will never become the executioners as part of the endless conflict. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. Now we shall continue with the final statements of the defense. the floor to the defence.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Your Honours. Just before lead counsel takes the floor, I'm going to respond to the prosecution's submissions from today on the law. And this is from the real-time transcript at pages 30 to 31. I'm going to be very slow. The prosecution said that the defence argued that Mr. Mokom's contributions were neutral or innocuous. And then they submit, as a matter of law, that his contributions don't have to be criminal. As a matter of law, that's absolutely correct. But the defence didn't assert that Mr. Mokom's contributions were innocuous. Our point is that the evidence of what he did is not sufficient, but more importantly, that the prosecution hasn't shown any link between these contributions and the charged crimes. This is the black hole in this case. The prosecution has pulled out one alleged link at the last minute in reply, this notebook. And Maître Clarochelle is going to enjoy talking about that document after me. But the problem is with these links and not the character of the contributions, not about the innocuousness or otherwise. Next, the prosecution said that they only have to demonstrate that Mr. Mokom's conduct in its totality contributed in some way to the commission of crimes. And this was the real-time transcript of today, page 31, lines 8 to 10. Let's be very precise here. The legal standard for contribution for Article 25(3)(d) is a significant or at least significant contribution to the crime. And this is in the prosecutor versus Mbarushimana decision on the confirmation of charges, 16 December 2011, at paragraph 238. That pretrial chamber said it cannot just be any contribution. It must be at least significant. Aiding and abetting, the legal standard for contribution for Article 25(3)(c) is not just any contribution. It must have had a causal effect. What does that mean? We see in the Bemba Article 70 trial judgment, paragraph 94, that the contribution must have furthered, advanced, or facilitated the commission of the crime. So, not just to contribute in some way, there has to be more for these suspects who aren't committing, who aren't commanding, who aren't ordering. This is the safeguard, this contribution, which we haven't seen in the charging documents or anywhere over the last 3 days. Next, the prosecution said that it's irrelevant whether Mr. Mokom is part of any grand criminal plan or part of the common purpose. This was at the real-time transcript, page 31, lines 11 to 15. We agree, and Mr. Mokom was not part of that plan. But the prosecution must demonstrate that he was contributing to a group of people acting with a common purpose. The prosecution conceded that it's not a crime to contribute to the military activities of an armed group. We will go one step further. What does that concession actually mean? It means it was not a crime to contribute to the anti-Balaka without a showing that those contributions made the requisite contribution to the charged crimes in this case. Otherwise, thousands and thousands and thousands of people would be standing in that box together with Mr. Mokom. And this is what's missing. And this is why this case does not meet the standard for confirmation. I'll now hand to lead counsel who will close out the defence submissions.
Thank you, Your Honours. We have heard the prosecution in their reply begging you to run away from credibility determination. It's true. You don't need to decide conclusively at this stage about the credibility of witnesses, but you cannot ignore it. And that's clear from the language, again, of the Barushimana appeal decision, a case that was not confirmed. A man who was participating in peace talks here in Europe and charged with crimes committed in Congo by some militia there. What did they say? At paragraph 46. In determining whether to confirm charges under Article 61 of the statute, the pre-trial chamber may evaluate ambiguities, inconsistencies, and contradictions in the evidence, or even doubts as to the credibility of witnesses. Any other interpretation would carry the risk of cases proceeding to trial, although the evidence is so riddled with ambiguities, inconsistencies, contradictions, or doubts as to credibility, that it is insufficient to establish substantial grounds to believe the person committed the crimes charged. What were those last two bullets from the prosecution? A notebook, and a quote, both coming from witness 2232. So the last munitions are artisanal munitions. I submit to you and I will demonstrate why. The notebook, according to the prosecutor, and I'm at page 30 of the real-life transcript of this morning. This is important evidence of Mr. Mokom's direct link to the attacks during which the charged crimes were committed. Finally, we have here a last attempt at showing a link. Finally, after 3 days. There is a link. There is a notebook. There is also, they say, other evidence than 2232, but they still use that sword, and they should fall on it. They still rely on 2232 up to the last minute. can I go 30 seconds in closed session?
We will go in closed session, Mr. Court Officer.
We're back in open session, Mr. President.
Please continue.
First of all, at page 6 of the notebook, there is a number attributed to Mr. Yekatom. 7264-0973. If you look at the list of the prosecution's attributions at CAR OTP 0000-1197, this notebook is not even relied upon for the attribution of phone numbers, including to Yekatom at page 20 and 21. And at page 20 and 21, the numbers attributed to Yekatom are different. But it doesn't end there. Because there is another person who spoke about the notebook. And that witness is 446. At CAR OTP 934 000001 at page 24 to 26. I will read it with being careful. Question by Mr. Van der Poel. There's a document I wanted to show you. It's at tab 52. CAR OTP 2100-2602. And it's a notebook that was produced by a witness. And I want to show you and ask you some questions about it. The first thing I'd like to do is to go to page 26. And I wanted to ask you about some of the names we see here. if we can just blow up the handwritten part of it so the witness can see it. That's very good. Can you see it, Mr. Witness? Yes. Do you recognize these names, Mr. Witness? Yes. In fact, it is my writing. Is that right? Says Mr. Van der Poel. It is my writing. Whew. Where did all these names come from? And then he talks about the name. The important part after that is found at page 26. Line 6, question. That's very helpful. And when is it that you think you wrote this? Answers the witness. Indeed, you have no idea how it is helpful. This was before my arrest. I remember very well that notebook. It was before my arrest. The attack had already taken place. That is the attack of 5th December. And it is subsequently, after the attack, that earlier on this morning, this book was meant to have help coordinate. It was after the attack of the 5th December that I had to write down the number of each authority or each leader so as to be keeping contact. That is my handwriting. I remember that we had already crossed back to the other side of the river. I think this must have been in January, February. I'm not very good with memory, but it was after the attack. Can we go in closed session for 30 seconds?
Let's move into closed session, please.
We're back in open session, Mr. President.
Please continue.
Thank you. So what I'm suggesting to you is that this last piece of evidence used by the prosecution was something that was used to reestablish peace, to be able to contact more easily those people that had people under their orders. Not something, as suggested by the prosecution, that was used as a tool to coordinate attacks. Your Honors, because, where's my paper about credibility stuff? I wanted to, we spoke at length at 2232, and the importance of the date of the Njo attack, because how he used that attack to link Mokom to some crimes. And the news report we saw yesterday was produced on the 22nd of September 2013, but does not establish the exact date of the Njo attack. And I mentioned to you that the exact date of the Njo attack exists in the evidence, and I would like to move orally today, by way of Rule 35, for the authorization to put one more document on our list of exhibits, and that is document CAR OTP 2066-1422, from which the date of the attack on Joe can be clearly established to happen on the 16th of September 2013. And because of the importance the prosecutor puts on the evidence of 2232, I would like you to take that document in consideration in your deliberation. Because in that document, you will find the exact same picture that was on the news report. And that document is a report prepared by two persons who were traveling back from Bosangoa to Bangui on the 16th of September 2013, and who ran into the Battle of Njo. So for me, it establishes beyond any discussion that this battle took place on that date, and as we demonstrate yesterday, that on that date there were absolutely no contacts with Mokom and Dedan. And one further argument to justify the inclusion of that document in our list of evidence is the fact that despite its crucial importance in assessing the credibility of witness 2232, it is not marked as PEXO. A further demonstration, if you needed one, that the prosecutor came before you without knowing its case. The fact, and that document, Your Honor, was disclosed to us on the 20th of July. 1 month after they were supposed to conclude and finalize the identification, that you had given them an extra delay to identify everything that is exculpatory in the case. We got this. So I would conclude with this. I would ask you, in your deliberations, to accept, even if we have passed the deadline that was given to us to include evidence in our list, that you accept to consider also this document as part of the record. Those conclude our submissions. I thank you very much for your attention. I would like to thank the court personnel for their patience, for bearing with us, particularly with Ms. Gibson. She was very fast. And I would like to thank the prosecution, and I wish you serene deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On your request and Rule 35 of the regulations of the court, we will rule on this in the decision in due course. Now, with the end of the defense final statements, we come to the end of the confirmation of charges hearing, but we still have, the chamber still has to adjudicate a request from the defense of 4 July 2023 by email for written submissions, which we have reserved to decide in the hearings. So I will now adjourn the hearing, and we will resume at 15:30. The hearing is adjourned. Thank you very much.
All right, we will be.